Okay, so today we'll be focusing on more things related to backend, and we'll be focusing on things like we have the application with Mongoose, and we talked about configuring the environments and everything for production and development. Next thing that I would like to focus is the things related to migration with databases, because this is one of the uh, important aspects when it is coming to backend and data management, all those things. So we should have a proper idea on database migration. But you guys might not agree with me on this, because we are using something like MongoDB. So all purpose of the MongoDB is to not to have a schema, or maybe not to have like something like what we have in relational database. Do we really need this kind of migration tools in Mongoose, or do we need do we really want to consider something like that? But in reality, even though you are going with SQL or NoSQL, the evolution of your database, how things have changed throughout the course, it is something good that you guys should have. Like for using migration and migration script, what we can do is there are a few things that we do with database migrations. The first one is keep a track of your evolution on your database, and you guys can check out okay, how things have changed, um, and what are the things, what are the fields that got added, what are the fields that got removed. That's kind of thing that we can use. So um, uh, in a production level application, sometimes we most of the time with SQL databases, migration is one of the most popular options that we will use, that we will need. But in Mongoose and MongoDB databases, it is not that much popular, but it is a nice to have feature. Also, one of the most important thing with with uh, with, um, with with things like migration is we can populate the initial data. Say, for example, uh, most of the system might have authentication built into your application. If you have authentication, uh, the first user, the initial user, is a person who should be able to get into the system. Okay, so let's say like someone who's have super admin privileges. That kind of resource person should be created when we initiate our application. Okay, so in a production database, most of the time the production database is not accessible from outside. That is for security reasons. We don't expose the database for the outside world. We keep it under heavy. We will most of the time we will close the ports and blocked by firewalls, and the database is not accessible. If we had database access, we might be able to put initial data into the database, but for some reason, if most of the time, 99% of the time, we do not have access to the database. So putting that initial data is going to be a problem. The initial data we need to put somehow. So in order to do that, we will use migration script. So using this migration script, we can get the initial data in place. Okay. Um, So for relational databases such as Postgres, MySQL, uh, something something similar sort. We will be having ORM tools, something like Mongoose. So Mongoose is a connection manager ORM tool for MongoDB. So Mongoose is the broker between our or the client from our end, from the application to the MongoDB server. But in this scenario, there is there is not like uh, um, m- a migration tool that is like built in to uh, built into our application using uh, uh, something like a very useful tool. So especially with the Mongoose side and MongoDB side, we won't find that much of information, that much of um, availability of libraries to do that. But if you are in something like SQL side, you will find a lot of ORMs out there. There is type ORM, Prism, that's kind of platforms support migration by default when you are doing the connection initialization and all those things. But unfortunately, for uh, things like MongoDB, most of the time people do not do migrations, but it will be helpful to have um, something like that in order to keep the initial data, keep the application up and running. Okay, so we'll be using some tool which we can utilize, which call migrate. Okay, this is a tool, migrate npm. So this is like uh, a third-party tool where we can use to do migration and helping us with the migrations with the database and everything. So this is a special use case um, that we can use in our application to add the data and everything, so we don't have to worry about that much uh, when we are doing the setup and everything. Okay, so we'll be using npm script to do the MongoDB migrations. Um, and if you use something like relational database, I would not recommend this migration tool specifically. Probably go with something like ORM tools. Uh, Sure, yeah, it will help with the initial migrations and all the stuff. For now, since we have start using MongoDB, we'll initiate the migration using this npm package. Okay, it's called migrate. So it's pretty much simple in order to work with these use classes, helpers, and everything. We'll see how we can get a simple migration going on. All right. What we'll do is we'll first install the migrate package. I will open up a terminal and I will install migrate. I think we have some dependencies issues. I will just pause around it. Pause. migrate /force. So next thing that we would do is we will create the migration scripts for our use cases. So most of the time we use the src directory, and we have something called migrations in here. And if you might need some utility class to do the migration helps, and we will create a migration util as of this place. You can create it in the migration class or whatever the folder structure. It does not really matter. Okay, as long as migrations are there. Just let me move the utility within the migrations. So I will have utils, which will help me with the connection and all those things. Okay, so we have migrations, we have utils within our application, and so this tool, the migrate is database agnostic. That means it does not uh, consider what is the underlying technology that we are using. So if you have MongoDB, if you have Postgres, anything that you can use with this migration script, it does not matter as long as you are following um, the migration script and migration stuff. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do, we need to get the MongoDB connector in place. Otherwise, we can't execute queries, we can't execute anything. So first thing that we will need is the database connection. And how we're gonna do that is uh, we can use uh, the environment files to get the URL and all those things. Right now, what we'll do is we will hard code the URL so we can connect this. So within the utils function, uh, we will have a class for let's say uh, database database.helpers.ts. So within here, we will get the database instance access or the connection to database, as I mentioned earlier, uh, based on our application. It might be little bit changed since we are using Mongo. We will be using a Mongo client to get the initial database, and what we'll need is the MongoDB connection URL, something like this. And within the MongoDB connection URL, we should get from the environments that we are working on. So if you are in production, you can get it from the production URL, or if you are in development, you can get the development Mongo URL. For right now, I will use the development one, but remember, this should be coming from the environment that we are working with. Okay, it should not be hard coded, something like this. You can use the same technique that we have used in the main, in the app module, where we get the environment path, and from the environment path we can read the file, and we can get the MongoDB URL based on the environment that we are running on. Right now, I'm gonna just do a hard code configuration. And next thing that I would need is a database connection. So I will be using something like this. So I have a method or a function called getDB. It's going to be asynchronous function, and I can have the Mongo client connect method where I can connect to the application. So there are options that we can provide, like whether we are using SSL or DSL, that kind of stuff. If you do not want to mess around the connection, we can just ignore those things. Right now, I think this one is optional at this point. So we will just leave it like that. So we will have a Mongo client rather than saying any. I will say I will have a Mongo client out of this, and client.db method will return the database that we need. So we can use the create a new DB instance, or we can use existing database, whatever the uh, actions that we need to do, we can utilize this one right over here. So next thing that we need to do is uh, um, uh, we need to do some changes around the application and migration. So um, the migrate tool that we are using is based on JavaScript. Okay, but in here we are using TypeScript. So there should be a little bit of gap need to be adjusted, like how we're going to use JavaScript things in um, uh, JavaScript related things in TypeScript. So we might need to do some adjustments in here. But uh, um, uh, we will look into this as we go along. Right now, we do not need that much attention in here. So next thing that we'll be using is um, what we'll do is creating the database scripts and all those things, so we can create the database packages. Okay, so one thing that the migration script support is creating the migration script for us. Okay, so when we are creating migrations, what happens is there will be certain scripts which will be executed one by one. So what we can do is um, we can have a template when we are using the application, and when we are not using when we want to create a simple when we want to create a simple migration file, what is the template that we're going to use. Okay, so first thing I would do is create a template. Just give me a second on here. I think I have a working project. There you go. I will check that one. It makes things easy for me. SRC. And the next thing that I would do is creating the template. So the template is something acting as initial point. So when we want to create a migration script, you will use this as initial point. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna create a template.ts under utils. Okay, template.ts. So in this template, we will have something similar like this. So we have the get DB function where we had in the database helper. So I am going to use that like this. So the template, the migration script that we're going to be using is going to come up with two different methods. One is up and the other one is called down. So whenever we are creating a new migration script, this this will be the one that we'll be using in order to make the application work. Okay, so uh, we will first create the migration script. Think probably the utility class should come out, otherwise the template will not work. So what I'll do is I will cut this one. Not sorry, I will remove the utility under SRC, otherwise the template would not work. So I'll rename this migration.utils. Okay, and under templates, under the template, we should say um, the absolute path for this. So think the file that we are getting is somewhere from the util itself. That means even though the database helper is relative to the template, but the template is something that we will be creating out of the scope. So this is going to be the blueprint for our template, blueprint for our migration. So if we put a relative path, then it will not work. We will use a relative path and see whether it is working. Relative means relative to this directory, but the migration will not have the same effect in here, so it won't work. So to avoid that, what we will do is we will have the relative path just like here. And next thing that what we will need is this something called the TS compiler. Okay, that means what we will be working with is going to be in the tool that we are using in here is what we call a um, JavaScript compiler. Okay, this compiler, the JavaScript compiler does not know anything about the TypeScript, so the migration tool is not something that will be working properly. So what we need to do is we need to say what is the compiler that we're going to be using. So it's going to be the TS node compiler that we'll be using. You don't need to know about this section right now. Remember, we have a database connection. We have a template. Template is what we'll be creating out of. This is like the blueprint for our migrations, and this is the compiler that we're gonna do the compilation from JavaScript to TypeScript and everything. Okay, so next thing is we need to do is we need to create migration script. Okay, we need to create migration script and work on those things. So one thing that we can do is running the migration script from our um, running our migration script from the package.json itself. So it makes things easy. So we do not have any scripts right now within our application. So what I will do is I will create a migration script. So first thing that we need to do is if you do not have script, but right now it is empty. So I will create a migrate create command or script. So pay a close attention to it. It's very simple. So we will be creating a migration script. That means we are not what we are doing here is creating a migration script for us. We are not actually doing the migration. We are creating a template out of it. So when we create a migration, when we are about to do a migration, we should use a template file. We should use a template file. So the template file that we will be using uh, is the one that we have created right around here. You can see the template.ts. Okay, what I'll do is I will copy the relative path and put it as the input for this. So apps, the agro API, SRC, migration utils, and we um, will be using that as a template file. The next thing, the next thing that we need to provide is the migration directory. So where the migration should migration files should be created. So we will use this migrations directory. I will copy the relative path and I will just put the path in here. Okay. So apps, the Allegro API, SRC, and migration. So this is the place where we're gonna store our migration files. And the next thing is the compiler, obviously, and we can copy the path for that, and we can just put it in here as well. Sorry, I need to copy the relative path, otherwise it will not work. Oops, too much. So few things for creating a migration file. First, we define the template file where the templates is gonna use, and where are we gonna save our migration scripts. Okay, and which one of these is the compiler that we're gonna be using to do such a task. Okay, so it is like not something that you should remember, but it is how the migrate framework work. That's it. Okay, so what we'll do is we will create a migrate out of this. Okay, what we can do is right now if we go to the terminal, and I can, since I'm in the application, I can say npm run. uh, the command that I am executing is migrate create. Okay, so if everything goes okay, it should work. But right now it is complaining that I am missing the migration name. So what I need to provide in this scenario is a migration name. All right. So what I will do is when I'm creating this, I will provide a name. So easiest thing is npm. I'll show the whole command so it will make more sense. So migrate create, and I will leave a 2 double dash, and I have to name the migration. So let's say this migration is about the creating user schema or admin schema. So we should name that something useful. So I would say um, user schema, user schema. Okay. So you guys can see if it is successful, you will get a migration script generated for you under this URL. So I'm gonna close this one for now. This terminal at least. So if I go to migration directory, you guys can see that we have created a migration script. Okay, yeah, the important thing that you guys need to see here, the timestamp is there with the name of the file. Okay, as you guys can as you guys can guess, this timestamp is unique. It represent uh, it represent the time that we have created the migration script. So if you create another migration script, it will come after this. So the number that we use for the naming, it's gonna evolve by the time we creating. So in that way, the migrations that we are doing is the migrations when you are doing, it knows that okay, this should be executed first, the second one should be executed later on, and this goes on. Okay, so what we can do in this scenario, we have created a migration script using this template and using this compiler, and this will be the database helper that we will be using to connect to the database. That's why the migration util template, rather than having the relative path, I have used the path where if it is created under this migration directory. So that's the main reason this getDB function is used in this template as as uh, as it is relative, but it is comparing if we are using, or it is having the mental model. It is thinking that we are executing these things under migrations directory. So we have the database helper, we have the database. Now what we need to do is execute some commands, so we can get the initial data up and running, or we can create the uh, we can create the script when we are migrating our stuff. Okay, so we can the up command is executed when we do a migration up and there is migration down. That means if you want to undo a migration, we can call this down command. Okay, so if you are going back, if you want to reverse the database, you can call migration down. Then this will go away. So what we can do is we can initiate some data. So I will think there is a collection called users. That means there will be something like a database kind of thing in user. First of all, I need to make sure I have run the Docker Compose. We will in Finder. I'll make sure my MongoDB is running, otherwise it won't work. Cd up, Docker Compose up. Okay, my database should be running. I can check using the MongoDB Explorer that I have. This one, right? Yep. So I have SNG, yes, and I have SNG database, and there is a daily stock and one document there. So what I'll do is in my migration script, I will create a collection called users. Okay, and I will insert some data to that. So I will use that collection to connect to my database. Okay, so I have the DB instance where it gives me the database instance that I want to connect, and it should create it should create a collection in here. So what is the database that I'm using? So you guys can see the MongoDB URL has the SNG database pointer around here. So I can use that database. It is in my database connection URL. If you want to customize this, you can also do that. Right now, I am going to use the default database. So within this database, when I do my migration, it should create a collection called users. Right now, you guys can see that it is not having anything. It's only having daily stock. And I can insert data if I want using this collection insert method, because this one has a um, collection to it. And so what I'll do is I will create insert admin at example.com, and I will have a password to show. Roles will be at the active state. So I'm inserting a dummy data. This is not something that is real. Okay, so take this as an example of what we're gonna be doing. So uh, when I run this database script, what it will do is uh, it will have this collection, and in that collection I will insert one document, and it will have an email, password, roles, and status. It can depend on your migration script. So I assume that this one is the um, this this will be used to our authentication of the user and everything. So this is like one-time password that one-time thing that I'm doing for getting things started. Okay. So if you have other collections, if you have other documents to be instantiate, so you can use this method to do the initial data inserting part and everything. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a NoSQL database, so you probably would not think about the representation of these things as long as they are in correct place, okay, as long as they are within the correct collection. But initial data insertion and everything, you don't have to worry about that. The npm script will do that for you. Okay. The next thing is the down. What should happen if we down the migration? Right now, what we are doing is we are dropping the collection. Since we have created the collection, can also drop the collection. Okay, so when we do a migration up, this will be executed. If we do a migration down, this will be executed. So migration up will create this database and insert the document, and migration down will just delete the collection as it is. So now we need to find a way to execute this up and down things. So we can use the same package JSON that we have in our application. So we can say sorry, we can have um, uh, two more scripts. I will copy paste. It will be these two. So the first one is migrate up command. So the migration directory, I think we need to adapt to the migration directory. This is something from another project. So I will use the migration directory in here and change it. So migration up should know where the migrations are. Right now, it's going to go with the migration directory that I have pointed out, and the compiler for this. If you guys can remember, we are using the JavaScript to TypeScript compiler. So the compiler should be provided to us as well. So we will have the compiler in here as well. And I think I need to copy this and up to this part, compile. Okay, I will have the compiler here and the compiler in here. Sorry. So when we are compiling, when we are migrating up, we just need to know where the migration scripts are going to be and which one is the compiler. And if you are downing, that means you are not executing this one. You are uh, reversing back the effects. What you need to do is migrate down. Same goes, you need to know the migration directory, and you have to make it down. Okay, so Now, right now, let me execute migration up and see whether the database getting updated. If there is nothing wrong, npm run, and I can say migrate up. So migration up is executed. This file was found, and the migration is completed. So if we have the migration correct within our database, let's refresh. Yeah, there is another. There is one. What do you call? Um, Table is here, and we have the data that we have put in. As you guys can see, the ID is automatically generated for us, and the email and the password and everything is there. Okay, so we create a migration script. We call the up and we call down to delete it. So, for example, now now the next thing is for next migration. That means for the next migration script, say for instance we want to create something like a location. Okay, we have a document called location. We need to create a location migration. So really simple, we have everything in place now. So all we have to do is create a migration script. So I will say npm run migrate create, let's say location schema. Okay, we need to create a location schema. So if I hit enter, it will create a migration script. Now you guys can see it is after the user schema and location schema is created in here. Same as the user schema. Let's say I want to create something called locations. Okay, and I will name this location collection. Okay. Like what we did, we can have the initial data in here. So it's going to be location, but I'm not going to insert something related to user. I would say location name, and let's say city. This is like a dummy data that I'm assuming, but in real world, you should use the real world. For name, I would say extends PVT, and the city will be, let's say, Matale for now. And when we are inserting, when we are creating, when we execute in Docker Compose up, this will go up. But when we are down, when we want to reverse that, I will just drop the collection. Drop the collection. I will drop this collection. But it is, if you need to do something other than deleting the collection, you can also do that. Right now, I'm undoing the collection. Okay. As long as you execute a valid query using this connection, you are good. So if I want to migrate once more time, so I will say npm run migrate up. Now you guys can see that it is only executing the location schema. It is not executing the user schema as it should. Okay, that's mean the migration script know which are executed, which are not. If I execute the migrate up once again, you guys can see no ups scripts are executed. That's because we know what are the scripts that have been executed and whether the migration should go with that or not. So if I look in the MongoDB and I will refresh, now you guys can see there is another collection called location and there is one record as we expected. All right, so the location locations will have the migration up and running in here. Now, if I want, um, if I look if I look at this section, and if I say rather than migrate up, if I say migration down, and what it'll do is it will execute the down down script in the reverse order. Okay, because if it is executing from the creation order, the down script will execute from the other way around. Otherwise, it won't work. So you guys can see, first execution has done with the location schema, and second one is the user schema, and those all were down scripts. So down scripts were executed, and migration is completed. If I refresh this now, you guys can see those collections were no longer there because we dropped the collection as the down command. The down command will just drop the collection, that is like removing the collection, and it wouldn't be there. So if I clear it once more time, rather than saying down, if I say up again, now you guys can see there are two scripts in place. The one is the user schema, the second one is the location schema. Those things will be executed. If I look at my database again, you will see those two schema created as the ascending order. Okay. Sorry. So when we are creating a migration script, the two scripts that we have created, the user schema and the location schema, those will be executed as the timestamps permits. The down will execute from bottom to up. So that is like the way these things are executed at the moment. Okay. So what is the use case of this? If you guys can see, I can have some initial data within my application, but if you are using something like SQL database, of course, you can create the tables as well. Okay, so in MongoDB, we do not, we do not have the concept of schema. It is not like something fixed. That is like a anti-pattern, or I would say not the best use case of MongoDB, where you define the schema, or we have something like that. It's not going to be something we will be defining, but of course you can create an empty schema and empty collection, and you have something like this, but that will defeat the purpose of having something like a NoSQL database. Okay. All right. um, so you guys get the idea of how migration run and migration will work on. So you guys, anyone want to execute this? Anyone want to execute the migration script? You guys can, of course, the package JSON will be uploaded wherever you are gonna go within your application. So for example, if you are updating in this to a Docker file, or if you are uploading this to a server, this package JSON should be there, because all the dependencies and everything for the backend are going to be there. So we need this package JSON. So once the package JSON is there, we can execute this migration script to set up our LAN, to set up our basic application setup. Then we can execute our main application. Okay, so the migration, probably in the production, we won't be needing migrate create, because we will be not creating migration files at the production. We already have created for this one is most probably going to be executing only development level or development phase only. But for production, we'll definitely execute this migrate up and migrate down in our application. So we will be executing those things to create the database, initiate the database, and doing the migration at the first class. So when you have the initial data and everything set up, you don't have to worry about getting into your backend at the first time. And if you have schema in your, if you have a SQL database and the schema creation, all those migration steps will help you to make things work as they are. Okay, so know the use case of the migration tool, what are the benefits, and what is the complexity, how to set up. And this one, the migrate tool that we have used in here is what we call a generic one, a generic tool that we have used. But as I mentioned earlier, if you are using something like relational database and the ORMs, we'll probably have good something good. Honestly, I would go with, from my experience at least, I have find type ORM, one of the nice ORM libraries out there. It is helping with a lot of things. Migration is one of them, and it's also help with one of the projects. One of the projects with tenancy. So it's a good framework if you are using with if you're using with SQL databases. So try it out. Try it out. Its own migration. The migration script will be something very similar to this. It will have up and down. Whatever the things that you need to do, you will have instance for your. In here we get the database connection. In type ORM or something like that, we get the connection or query runner, where we can use the query runner to execute so many things like creating a collection, creating a schema, creating a table, inserting whatever you like, you can execute over there. Okay, so this is like the basics of migration and what is the use case. So you guys have any questions up until this with the migration, how the migration scripts are created, how those things are used, what are the things in our application we should consider? Any questions up until this, the migration and migration scripts? Okay. All right, that's good. So we have talked about migration, and next thing we should look at is like I mean, of course, the solution that I have put it in here, it's in scatters. Okay, so we do not have everything in place. So I think this will be a good point as of now to give you guys one of the assignments. So now you guys can see that um, um, we just have the authentication come in, and we have the sign in option where you will get the users from the user service and find one and the password and authorization. So um, note down this assignment. So we need to complete this one to coming from the database itself. So user service find one. Right now, I think user service is something dummy. Yes, user service find one will use someone from the someone from here, which is a hard-coded list. So what I need you guys to do is find one should come from the database itself. Okay, we need to use the repository and get the data and everything. But remember, for the first time login, when we log into the application, we should get we should have a user to log in with to start with. You can't insert any data from direct communication with the Mongo client or MongoDB. You have to use the migration in order to insert the first user. And the next thing is password should not, this password that we are using in here, the find one and the password that we are meshing in here should be in bcrypt. Okay, you can't use plain old password. You guys should use bcrypt to encrypt the password and do the calculations. Okay, so everybody got the requirement. Anyone need more explanation one more time? Raise your hand if you need. Okay. Anyone need explanation what to do? Raise your hand, please. This is be your assignment number 1, and probably will get a week to complete. That means before next Thursday. Put it in a GitHub link and share the GitHub link as the assignment URL. Okay. So all in order. It's going to be a good thing that you guys will have to go everything what we have talked so far: authentication, initial users, password encryption. So I will be looking at those key points, and probably authenticate the login. Login should be unauthenticated. That means anyone should be able to log in, but have user details. Like let's say if you want to access a controller like one of these controllers, okay, let's say git, find all, or patch, or delete, whatever. These should not happen unless there is access token presented. Okay, we need to have the access token to be presented in order to work with these APIs. The login one, it can be public. This one be a public API. But if you want to get user details, if you want to access these things, you should be authenticated, and the JWT token should be presented. Okay. Any more questions with the assignment? You all have 1 week to complete. All good? Okay. Extra one for the deadline, a little bit heavy because of a couple of assignments. Okay, so I think you guys will be busy. So okay, 2 weeks, I can make that happen. That means August. You guys might need extra week. That means not August 17, August before August 24, right? Deadline will be 24. Let me put that in chat, otherwise I will forget everything. Okay, sorry. Assignment deadline to be 24th. Okay. So others will know. All right, got it. Nice. So the requirement, once again, I will repeat. You guys can have. The authentication service should work. Sign in should come from the user service, should find the user from the database rather than the hard code one here. Password should not be enabled, something like this. It should be encrypted. Use bcrypt library to do the password encryption and all. And when you are creating the user, the initial user should be able to log in. Initial data should be put using migrations schema like this. And remember one very important thing: when you are putting the password in here, since it should be decrypted, you should put the decrypted password here, otherwise we won't be able to log in. Okay, so this is a plain password, but when we are dealing with encrypted password, make sure the encrypted password we should put in the collection, otherwise the initial user won't be able to log in anyhow. And URL that can be open for everyone to work with, but when you are using it anything with the user controller, those things should be those things should be those things should be um, authenticated unless you have a token in your token within the request, you won't be able to call these things. So authentication, authorization management, use passport.js. These are like hints that I'm giving. Use passport.js to handle. And there are things like guards, strategies from passport.js. You will find ton of examples. So it will be very easy to implement as well. So no worries there when you are dealing with things. So if everyone got it, we can proceed to the next section. Okay, you have 2 weeks to complete. Okay, all right. Anything comes up, anything that you guys need help with, just go ahead and uh, uh, go ahead and ping me. And think for the database, you guys, since you are familiar with Mongo, use Mongo database. And I'm not gonna connect the database and check everything out, but I'll be looking at the environment, how do you set up the environment, whether the URL is there and all. If you guys can use this connection string as it is, then I can test the application without an issue. But it should be some with these values, otherwise I won't be able to test this in production. But I'll go through the code and check whether the all are in order. And if you guys like to practice and everything, go ahead and write test cases. So that will be added advantage for you, but nothing. It won't be compulsory to the assignment itself. It's take it as a challenge. Okay, take it as a challenge and complete at least 1 or 2 test cases, not all. And share the GitHub link or whatever the source code management system, so I can clone and do the gradings. Okay, good luck with that, and we will move on with the migration is done. And yep, we talked about Dockerization, that is done. So I think we will focus on something from the course content itself. Otherwise, we will lose a lot of time. To testing, determine which screen the features available, mobile friendly content, when feedback, positives, mobile friendly forms, and everything. I think we do these things. So I will focus on something front end. So we did a lot of things in backend. We'll take something out of the to-do list that we have, CSS and Flex. I'm not gonna take a vote on it. I'm gonna do it. Otherwise, you guys will go more for backend stuff, which I have. By the way, if you need any help with something related to backend, let's discuss on a separate matter. I mean, if you can learn something this that would be good. That is okay. But if you have anything other than that, we'll focus on front end for now. So let me check whether the application is running. That's the terminal that I used for this. Or didn't I use a terminal? Let me check. Post by sharing. It's a terminal. Terminal, where are you? Not here. I'll create a new terminal. Anyhow. application, I need to go to the project. Angular. Next deal aggro. Okay, I think I have the application running. Resume sharing. Okay. So one thing I would like to discuss in this course, like the flex boxes, and you guys can see that in here we mainly focus on things like when we are working with within this application. Uh, we were thinking about getting these things in a mobile friendly manner. So uh, if I go to the inspect, and if I change the device for, like, let's say something like Pixel 5, so this looks good in Pixel 5. Okay, but if I change something to responsive, more common resolution like this, you guys can see the application does not um, work, looks good, at least at this level. So what we can do is we can adjust these things using CSS rules or flex boxes, and most of the time we will use CSS media queries. Okay, so you will get a glimpse of media queries, but right now my intention in this point is to get this UI not this much not this much larger in a more web screen, but for a phone screen it looks good, but for a desktop I would make it more center, or make it more smaller, so we can comprehend this. So what I'll do is I will go to the code and check the location. So it's the login. And right now we have something like some CSS like this. Uh, um, okay, so what we have in here, something like this. So we have the host. Host is like the whole component that we having in here, and we have the display flex. Okay, the flex is one of the newest addition in CSS. So we have other display methods like display flex in this manner. we what we are saying, we are going to be using the flex system for displaying our host items. Okay, so there are other display mechanisms, like if you say none, then the view should go away. So we are displaying none. And but if you want something like inline, so we have some display mechanisms like inline. It's gonna do it in an inline way. But what we are focusing on now is the display mechanism called flex, okay, which is a way of arranging items, a way of arranging our items in our host. So colon host means the whole application. So in this scenario, the whole application or the whole components, it's going to have only one component, which is called form. Okay, so whatever we are applying, it's going to apply for the form component or the form element that we have in here. That is if we use host. So the display mechanism will be flex. Okay, And justify content is the how do we justify these contents um, in this flex manner. So looking at flex, there are two flex variables that we need to know. That is the flex direction. Okay, flex direction, whether it's gonna show it in a column or a row or a reverse column or a reverse row. Okay, we will see these things in action. Right now, the flex by default flex direction is going to be row. Okay, so it's not going to change anything in here because we do not have much elements in our application. So right now, we have the flex direction of row. And if it is raw, how do we justify the content? How do we justify the content? Right now, you can see the justify content is center. So within a raw manner, the content will be center justified. Or we can say other justify contents like flex start. Flex start would do is it will move the content within a row to the start of our UI. Okay. And if you want to make it the content to be end of the spectrum, what we have to say, flex end. So it will go to the other end. Okay. So I want this to be centered. So I call this as center. So the main axis, the flex direction is main axis is row. So the justification happens, justify content happen to the uh, 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 happen to the main axis. So in this scenario, the main axis is the row axis that is like the horizontal one. So the content will be center justified, so center aligned, or content will be within the center. And the cross axis. So since the flex direction is row, we have the cross axis, the other axis which is in 90 degrees. That is called align items at this point. So it will be flex start. Flex start in the sense uh, the y-axis, everything will be in the start section. Say, for instance, I want to make it to the bottom and I have to say end, then it will go to the end of the page. Okay. So I want to make it center. I just can say just center align items. So it will be center align. We have a little bit of a question in here. That is the if you are working with align items, okay, you should have a height which is something in measurable state. So if I undo this height, now you guys can see, even though I align the item center, it won't move other than that. That's because if I put a background color in this host and I say, let's say something like aqua, you guys can see the alignment only happen within the area which is highlighted in this color. Okay, so if you do not define something something for the height, the align items can't move that much. So if, example, I would say for height rather than 100 view heights, that means 100% of the view height, I would go something like 50% of the view height. Okay, now you guys can see it is taking the 50% of the total view height. And now you guys can see it is little bit centered, but it will be centered around the aqua area, the color blue area will only within the blue area, it will be centered. Okay, so if I say rather than align item center, I can say flex end. And you guys can see it's gonna align where its borders are. So it is aligned in here. And if I say start, then it will go to the very top in here. Okay. Remember, if you do not define a height, then it won't work as you expected. Okay. So to make things like there is a toolbar on here. So if I say 100% view height, 100 view height, So uh, the app, the host will take a little bit uh, more than what we can fit in, because this toolbar is having an area, and we are saying 100 view height. That means from this point to this point we call 100 height. So the area which is taken by the toolbar will be scrollable to the down. If you do not want that, we should say, okay, do not take 100 view height. You don't you should fill this, but do not overlap. So what I need to do is I need to calculate and remove the area of the toolbar. So I would say go go for the max, but exclude the area that you have taken for this toolbar. Okay. So I know for a fact this toolbar is having you guys can see the size in here. It is 64, right? It's in pixel. So I can say whatever the height you uh, have that height and reduce 64 pixels out of it. So it will perfectly fit without a scroll. Now you guys can see I have a scroller here. I can scroll down. You can see that scroll is there. I can scroll a little bit down. Then you guys can see it's perfectly hiding the toolbar. That means this is perfectly 100 view heights. Now what I need is I need this toolbar, but I do not want to scroll this. So what I can do is I have to say, okay, it's gonna be 100 view height, but it should be minus 64, 64 pixels. Okay, 100 take 100 view heights and reduce 64 pixel out of it. But the issue in here, if I save this, it will give an error. The main reason is like these are two different units. So first one is talking about in view height. The second one is talking about pixels. So we can't have two different units to interact with each other. They do not know how to work with that. So we have in CSS something called a calc function. Calc. Okay. So if you provide this to a calc function, it will calculate whatever the values in there and adjust. So now you guys can see it is working as expected. It is not overflowing. It is not overflowing at all. And the calc function, what it does is it will calculate the 100 view height. So the 100 view height in this scenario is gonna be 704 for the area and 64 this, and it will automatically calculate the view height depending on here. So the total view height will be 768 as I define in my uh, view area for the responsive view. So reduce the six, it will calculate the 676.8. That means 100 view height in this scenario, and only this scenario only. So 100 view height, it is equal to the value that we are seeing here, 679, and it's going to be in pixel. And since the calc function is used, this is automatically converted to that. And if I reduce 64 out of it, 64 pixel out of it, the answer would be 8 out of 4 is actually 4, and 6 out of 6 is 0, and we have 7 in here, if I'm not mistaken with my mathematics. So the height of the host in this scenario, the area with the aqua color, is going to be 604 pixels. And if I look at in my inspector, yes, you can see the height you will see in here is 704. That because we have calculated and eliminated this. Okay. Now, now the now what I can do is if I say flex start, I will say center, it will be center aligned within this host. perfectly. Okay. And the calculation, I will put it in here. Just remove the background color. It's annoying. Just to make an impression, I have put it in there. Okay, so use of the calc function, know that. And the flex, we have talked about flex directions. By default, it is raw. You can have a, we will play around with flex a little bit more right now. Know the calc function, have a little bit idea on flex, how it works. Mm, okay. So next thing that we need to do, I will change the design of this phone. So let's say Pixel 5, and if I hit refresh, and if I look at the toolbar that I'm seeing here, now you guys can see the toolbar height has changed. It is 56 now. Okay, and 56, and this one is changing on that, but the value of the toolbar, because based on the CSS framework material has for for our application, for our toolbar, it is 56. If you look at in a browser, if you look at in a desktop, it will be 64. So the size of this toolbar has changed. So what we need to do is, when we are dealing with a mobile, we can't have this calculation if we won't get the perfect picture ratio. Okay. In this scenario, we can't have this. Why? Because 64 is only working for desktop, but for mobile, it is 50, 50, 56. Okay. Now we need to say somehow, okay, let's have a color in here so it will make more visible at least. So you guys can see there is a white line in here that that is that is the that is because of the wrong calculation that we have done. But if you look it in a browse in a web in a mobile, or not a mobile, a desktop dimension, you will see it's perfectly fitting. But if you in a phone, there is a white line on the bottom because of the wrong calculation. It should be 56 for mobile and 60, if I'm not mistaken, 64 for, yes, 64 for desktop. So we need to do the calculation based on the screen resolution. So how can we do this? So the easiest thing that we can do is using CSS media queries. Okay. So by default, uh, uh, it is applying for all the screen types, But if I want something to apply only for this dimension, only for uh, dimension where the width is 399 and the height is about this, we can apply. But for for some for most of the form factors that we have, we do not have different widths. We can't expect all the fonts to have the same height, but most of the time the width are within a given couple of ranges. So there will be 300, there will be 500. So based on the fonts that is available on the market, okay, there are a couple of widths that we can safely say, okay, if it is under 500 pixels, we can consider that as a font. Okay, the width, if the width is under 500 pixels, we can consider that as a font. If it is under 1000 pixels, there it will be like a tab. If it is less than 1300, so based on the screen widths, we can determine now, okay, this is going to be a font, this is going to be a tab, but its orientation also matters. But for most of the time, we'll consider the orientation of portrait, and based on the width, we can consider the CSS that we're gonna apply. So we call these things, things like small mobile is like we consider as 320, mobile medium is 375, mobile large at 455, and tablet around 700, and a laptop around 1024. And a laptop large will have something like that, and the list goes on. So if I want to specifically, if I want to specifically target one of these ones. So for example, if I want to target mobile small, mobile medium, mobile large, so I can write what we call these things as breakpoints. We can have multiple breakpoints and work on these things. So we have CSS media breakpoints. Okay, so we can have multiple breakpoints in our application, and based on that breakpoints, we can change our CSS queries. So uh, we can specify something like this. So the media query always start with at media, and only this is like the device type and divide device uh, where this is going to apply. Either it is going to be on screen or whether it is printing, and the max width for this media query to apply should be 600. If it is more than 600, this won't apply. If it is 600 or less than that, this will apply. Okay, this media query will apply. And this only screen means we are in the screen mode. But if you are in something other than a screen mode, like a printing mode, this media query won't also apply. So there are two conditions. First one is the medium you are, and what is the width of your screen resolution. So I will take a copy of this and I will put in my CSS class. Okay. And right now, what we have to do is we have to do the changes in here. So if you can remember, if you guys can remember, this will be only applied for anything under 600 pixels. Okay, we'll do some simple tests first, and consider this is as a separate CSS file, but it is inheriting from its inheriting values from its parent. For example, if I want to change the background color green, but in mobile, if I want to have a color like red, I can do that, but I need to use the same CSS class or CSS ID that I have used in here. So for only for screens less than 600, the background color, I would say red. Okay. So what will happen in here? So you can see the screen size is 400, around 400, and the color of this is red. If I change it to more than 600, in this scenario 700 something, then it will be turned into green. So if you look at anything less than 600, it will be in red, and if you change it more than 600, um, it will be in green. Okay, the same logics we can execute in here. So if it is less than 600, calculate to have 56. I mean the height, it should be 56. If it is in a other display, if it is more than 600, not applying this media query, whatever the resolution we have other than that, you should reduce 64 in here. So to have the color change, I would go background color, something gold in here, and background color blue in here. Okay, blue. Okay. So more than 600, you can see I'm not having a extra padding or something like that. I can go to the even the exact view. Yes, I do not have anything. If I go to pixel 5, As you can see, the bottom, the margin that we had, the bottom calculation was wrong. It was also gone. So yeah, I would remove these background colors so we can have a nice look around it. Okay, now the view is looking good for uh, both laptops and the desktops in here. Okay, so it's working as expected. But the main thing that we want to do, if it is in if it is in if it is in desktop, we should reduce the size. I think we have the login form class for that. If you look at the form itself, the login form, okay, we have given a class name called login form in here, and the login form will have width of 90. Okay, so I would make this is like 50. That means for desktop it's going to be around 50 because we haven't applied within a media query. If you like to have it less than 50, you can go 40, whatever the design suggests. And but if you look at this now in font, it is also going to be in 40 because we do not have a media query saying, okay, when you're in a mobile device, you should have this width. So we don't have something like that. So what we can do is we can say login form in here, uh, login form, let's say if you are in mobile, let's have like a pretty nice 90%. Okay, so 90% in mobile and 45% in desktop. Okay, so by that way you can have the same UI um, but in two different um, two different views. Okay, even you can change other things. Say for example, I want to have the justify content not to be in center but to flex start. I can overwrite that. So I will say flex start. So sorry, align items. I want to have those things in flex start. So in mobile, this will be on top since we have changed the alignment, and for desktop, it will be on the center. So we can override these things. And remember, when we override these things, it will change anything that is in here. Okay. So by default, it will inherit all, but in the specific media query, they will override the things that we have defined in here. So for example, the with the media query with 600 in this scenario, only gonna be changing the align items and height, but the things which is in the host itself, they are other things will not change. For example, display flex, flex direction, justify content, those things will not be changed. Those things will be in the values as they were. Only things that we are overriding in here will get changed. Okay. So media queries and flexes. And we can even change the flex. We will talk about flex direction in about now. So I will to demonstrate the flex boxes. I will create a dummy div in here. So I'll create a div. Okay, and I create 3 divs out of this. I will call this class cube, and I will have I can actually name this since these are like IDs. I can use IDs, ID, and I will say C1, and I will have C2. I will have something like C3. Okay, right now we do not see anything, but what I will do is I have cube, right? B cube. So I will apply what we call a class in here. Since I'm using ID, I'll use hashtag to indicate an ID. Okay, there is a cube, and since we are using CSS, CSS, I want to have all these cubes in the same size. Okay, so what I'll do is I will say with uh, within my CSS in here, I can say and within a div. That means anything within the ID cube and a div inside it. That means any children with the element type div will have these properties. So I can say something like width will be like 100 pixel and height will be like 100 pixels. Okay, to demonstrate it is showing, I will say background color to have like something like nice green 690. Okay. Okay, so I have these three cubes in here. Now if you guys can remember, uh, these three cubes are in a row fashion to the form itself. That's because we have set the host display direction for row. Okay, so anything in this component, there are two main component, which is the form and this div. Okay, these are like the children of the root component or the host component. So these will be aligned in a way we call we have those things as rows. But if I want to them be in column, I can change that. You guys can see it is changing to a column. That now it is no longer in that way. It will be in a column basis. But if you look at it in here, it's gonna be the same thing. It's gonna change into a column. Okay, so I have this three cubes in here. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to change these three cubes direction. Okay, since this is in column, the parent is in column, the div that is there, that I mean the host is in column, the div it's automatically taking the flex as column if since we have not defined it, but we can change the cube direction. So I will have 1 2 3 in here, so you can say 1 2 3 in here. And what I want to do is I want to change the cube's children. So cube has two children, 1 2 3, and the alignment for cube it is not fixed. So I can change in here. I can say, okay, you will be using flex systems, and the flex direction for these things will be raw. Okay, now you guys can see those things change to a raw fashion. So what I'll do is I will make these two into split screen so I can see much better. Okay, so the flex direction for this will be row. If I say column, it will be in the other way around. Okay, I will say row so I can change it. And there is a nice neat trick. Say for instance, I want to have these things in a row, but in reverse order. That means in right now what we are having is 1 2 3, but I want to have this in reverse direction. I can say, okay, flex direction 0, but it is in reverse mode. Okay, now you guys can see 3 2 1 has moved in here. What I'll do is within the div itself, I can say cube as a div, and within that div I want to do the its children. Right now it's the cube's children are 1 2 and 3. I want to change their flexes as well. I can say flex display, I can say flex, and I can say justify content to be center, align items to be center. So it will be centered around the centered around there, and I want to have the color of, let's say, something like white, so it is much more visible. Okay, so the div, any div within that cube, within that ID cube, and any div will have these um, um, these properties applied to them. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to have uh, a gap, between the login form and the cube that I have created. Okay, so I can do one simple thing that I can do is with the cube, I can say margin top, let's say have a 16 pixel. So it will create a margin between these two. Or something else that we can use is, you guys can see that login form, the form that we are having, and the cube are in this host. Okay, within this host. So what I can say, okay, host is having a flex, it has a column, and it is following these alignments. And I can say have a gap around the children's. So I can say 16px. So whenever another child even comes in, it will have the 16 pixel. So I don't have to say cube to have 16 pixel. If say for some reason I have another cube in here, okay, so I do not have to have the it's not it's let's say it's like a simple paragraph or h1 one week. Okay, so I do not I will say style background color red in here to point out. So if I have something like this, even what will happen is it will have 16 point of padding on top. I do not have to specify because I have already put the gap property within the host. So whenever we have more than one item, each of these items will have a gap of 16 pixel. Okay, you don't have to specifically say have this much amount of gap, and that's all. So you guys can see the cube has in having the flex direction of row reverse. I can have row, so it will change back. So if I want to have a space between these three guys, I can simply come and say, hey, cube, you will have more than one children. So when you are having it, have 8 pixel of gap between these guys. So we can have a gap property in order to assign a gap between the children. And if you want to have this not in a row but in a column, you can have the same thing, and the things will be applied. If you want to use column reverse, you can see the items order will change. So play around with these CS properties. You will find a lot more interesting things going on with Flex and Flexboxes. Okay, and there are other things that we can do. So, for example, I will put a background color for cube. Let's say for red. Okay, it is hogging everything in this space. And one other thing I would do is I will define a width for this cube. I will say width around 50%. Okay, so now you guys can see I have put the cube in to having to have 50% of width. Now we have some other things that we can do. Say for example, I want to yes, the gap is there. Since we have applied 3 pixels in here, we have a gap. But for some reason, I want to fill these gaps equally. I want to have these 3 boxes equally aligned or equally spaced out. So there is another trick that we can do. I will remove gap in here, and I will use something like justify content. And there are like several that we have seen. We have seen center, we have flex, and there is one thing called space between. So when we are justifying the content, it will have space between the children. Okay, so you can have the space between, so they will have equally spent the space around it. So I will have something like very subtle in here, so you guys do not get your eyes burned from red. Something like D9, D9, D9. Okay, so you guys can see that we can justify these things without any JavaScript or anything. You can have the space between, and there is space around as well. So it will have the space between and also some space uh, on the outer area as well. So play around with these things, you guys, till you guys get whatever you need. And one other thing I would like to show that this is 50%, and one of these boxes are like 100. What if we have like 6 of these? So I don't need actually these IDs anyhow. On let's say 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, something like this. And now you guys can see it is cramping up. It is not having the enough space to even have these things. If you look at the C1 is probably overlapping with C2. So we do not have enough space to do. So what we can do is, if something happens like this, we can say, okay, do not rush into these things. Just go to the next line. So we can say flex. What is that called? Flow. Flex flow. There is a CSS property called flow, and we can have the property like wrap. Okay. So what it will do is, if there is not enough space within the same row, it will have it will wrap around to the next line. So you guys can see only 4 is available to cater, other 2 will get into the 2 into the next line. So if I put like exactly 8, 8, 7, 8, right? 7, 8. You guys can see these are aligning with each other, but you guys can see we do not have a gap in here. So if I define a gap property in here, you guys can clearly see they have a gap between these things, and it works like a grid that we want to see. So without space around, I will say space between, and we have something like perfect grid kind of situation. Okay, so this is not a grid. We have flex grid, display grid as a separate one. So if I say rather than this displaying a flex, I can say display a grid. It will be a totally different thing. Okay, but what you can achieve with flex is you can think like flex display grid as a subset of flex. Okay, or a superset of flex, so something like extended out of this. But grid also provide like a table kind of structure. If you have used earlier on, that kind of thing will be there for you. Okay, so using flex you can do so much things. These are like the alignment items that we will do. Okay, so whatever you guys want to show this, however you want to change the position of each of these things, you guys can check that out with flexboxes and its use cases. Okay, and using media queries, of course you can change the change the things. If you are in a smaller screen, now you guys can see it is like not doing a pretty good job at this moment. So uh, you can change the media queries as you like and get the value that you are expecting. Okay. All right. So play around with media queries, play around with flex boxes, and get the desired outcome for your placement of your application. So this is something we will be using earlier before flex boxes. Most of these kind of things were done. I mean, I'm talking about very old internet. When we want to align such a thing, we would use something like tables, HTML tables, and do the table manipulation to get the correct it like this. But since we have Flexboxes and Flexbox supported, we no longer need to do that. We can simply use flexes to align items, but remember to know what are the Flexbox options out there. There might be a couple of things I am missing, but these ones will be enough so you guys can get started. And there are a lot of other things related to Flex. So Flex Wrap, Flex Grow, Flex Shinks, Flex, and a lot of things are there. So play around those things and know these CSS styles. So you will be better aligning these things uh, in in here. So one other thing that I can do is I can give like these all are like a look alike. Say for instance, I want to change the style of this, which is called inline styling. I can come in here and view the styling, and I can say flex grow, and I can say one. So you guys can see that. Uh, so if I say flex grow one, what will happen is, let me check, flex grow four. Um, So flex grow one, and if I add the same thing to, let's say, 3 rather than the ID itself, and you guys can see what happens in here. So uh, there are 4 elements in this in this scenario. Uh, uh, there are 2 elements without flex grows, which is 2 and 4. So what in here it does is 2 and 4 will take the assigned width. It's like 100. So 200 is allocated for both 2 and 4, and 8 for gap as well. And we are left with uh, some other spaces. Okay, in this scenario, we will say, okay, the first cube will be having a flex flow of 1. That means the rest of the application, rest of the space that we are having with the grid system that we are having here, the first cube will have 1 priority, and you can say flex grow 2. That means take all the space available in here, and uh, for the first one, it will have a flex grow of 2. That means it will be prioritized for 2, and the others will have less priority on here. Okay, so we can change the priority for something 5, something 6. So you guys can see it is changing based on the values that I am providing in here, the flex grow. And remember, this is if I say 10 in here as well. So the 1 and 3 will have equal priorities. So it will take the same space amount. Okay. So if I have only 1, that means the amount of space that is going to have, uh, it's no matter how much you Flex try to grow it, because others will take the amount and the rest will be allocated to first. But if you have two in here, and if they do not have the same value, the amount will be calculated, and based on the shared amount of shared pieces around here, it will grow and shrink. Okay, and you guys can play around with these factors, the Flex grow. Some news articles might have a huge alignment or something like a highlighted version for the first column. The others one will have a smaller one. That kind of grid you can achieve by using Flex Grow. And the growing system, it's based on the space that we are left with and the priority it will get. Okay, so if everything, if everyone in this section have the same Flex priority, it will be like something like this. So everyone will have the same Flex priority and it does not change. Okay, so it will, but if I change one in here, so all the flexes in here, this one has the Flex grow of 1, others three will have the same uh, same amount of Flex that it should have. Okay, so Flex grow system, have a look around it, and let's say this one has a 5, and you guys can see it is changing based on the amount of growth that we give. Okay, um, so it will be like um, a playground that you guys can go around and check whether things are in order. And you guys can see that it's easy to learn and not that much hard to learn Flexboxes and its use cases. Okay. Right. So that's done with Flexboxes, grid systems, and everything. So please play around with these things and have a nice UI and try to mock up it and get things done in everything that you like from this points onward. Yeah, that's pretty much it with Flexboxes. I mean, the creation is unlimited. You guys have to play around and go crazy on what you want to build. I'm just giving the head start. Okay, any questions up until this? Okay, seems not. I'll stop sharing and stop recording.